3 meters. 8 American Navy SEALs. Night vision goggles humming softly. Sensors active. Weapons ready. And somewhere in the dark Philippine jungle, one Filipino operator stood still, breathing slow, watching them for 5 full minutes. When he finally spoke, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a whisper that cut through everything. "You're dead." What happened next did not end the exercise. It rewrote assumptions. In 1992, during a joint training operation at Fort Magsaysay, something unfolded that American Special Operations would quietly study for decades. This is not a story about defeat. It is a story about humility, environment, and the moment the world's most advanced force realized mastery isn't bought. It's lived. Fort Magsaysay sits where roads thin and jungle thickens. Heat presses down like weight. The air is alive, wet, buzzing, never silent. For Filipino soldiers, this terrain is not an obstacle. It is memory. For visiting forces, it is hostile, unpredictable, exhausting. In 1992, the jungle wasn't a backdrop. It was a deciding character. The Americans arrived confident, disciplined, prepared. 12 Navy SEALs rotated through the exercise, 8 on the primary patrol. Each carried over $200,000 worth of equipment: thermal optics, night vision, encrypted radios, advanced sensors. They had trained across continents. They trusted their systems. And in most environments, that trust was justified. The Filipino unit was NAVSOG, the Naval Special Operations Group. Smaller, leaner, older rifles, simpler gear, no glowing optics, no constant radio chatter. Their preparation looked almost understated. But beneath that simplicity was something harder to measure. Men raised in jungle provinces, trained from beginning to disappear into heat, shadow, and sound. The mission was straightforward: a long-range jungle patrol. Penetration, surveillance, extraction. No live fire. No theatrics. The Americans established a defensive halt just before midnight. Sensors layered outward, overlapping fields of detection. In their doctrine, nothing human could get closer than 15 meters without triggering something. That belief would last less than an hour. Somewhere beyond the perimeter, a Filipino operator moved. Slowly, barely. Each step placed where leaves already rested. Each branch touched, never snapped. He did not crawl. He did not rush. He listened to insects, wind, breathing. He paused longer than most men are comfortable pausing. The jungle accepted him because he did not challenge it. Thermal optics scanned outward, picking up heat signatures of animals, tree trunks warming unevenly, distant patrol members shifting weight. The Filipino operator waited behind a fallen log, body temperature regulated by damp soil and stillness. To the sensors, he wasn't absence. He was background. Technology searched for anomalies. He was normal, 3 meters. That was the distance when he stopped. 8 SEALs sat low, whispering, checking arcs, adjusting gear. One scratched his cheek. Another shifted a knee. None looked in the right place, because there was no reason to. For 5 minutes, the Filipino operator simply observed. Faces, habits, weaknesses, breathing patterns. Then he leaned forward slightly and spoke, not loud enough to echo, just enough to be unmistakable. "You're dead." Confusion froze the Americans before instinct kicked in. Weapons swung. Lights flared. Sensors spiked. But the space was empty. The jungle closed again. Silence returned, heavier than before. The exercise was halted, not out of embarrassment, but necessity. The Filipino operator reappeared calmly from behind perimeter, hands visible. He pointed to each SEAL in sequence, describing where it could have struck, how, and why none would have heard it. There was no arrogance in his voice, only precision. That moment unsettled more than pride. It challenged doctrine. Lieutenant Commander Jack Morrison, a 12-year SEAL veteran, listened without interruption. He had led missions in deserts and cities. He trusted technology. But here, in this jungle, it had failed silently. What disturbed him most wasn't the breach. It was how effortless it had been. The exercise continued. Over 25 kilometers of jungle movement. The Filipino team moved light, navigating by compass, terrain memory, and instinct. They rested briefly, ate sparingly, never rushed. 20 hours later, they reached extraction. The American team arrived after 42 hours, exhausted, dehydrated, having fought the environment every step. Around a wooden table that night, gear piled beside them, something unprecedented happened. Morrison broke the silence. He didn't defend methods. He didn't explain budgets. He simply said, "We need to stop teaching and start learning." No American officer had ever said that in an exercise like this. The room went still. What followed was not humiliation. It was attention. The Americans began asking questions. How did you move without sound? How did you regulate heat? How did you read ground pressure? The Filipinos answered carefully, often demonstrating rather than explaining. Jungle warfare, they said, is not about control. It is about permission. One lesson stood out: movement. American SEALs moved efficiently, direct, purposeful. In the jungle, that efficiency translated into noise. Filipino operators moved indirectly, accepting delay as safety. "You sound like elephants," one quietly noted. Not mockery, observation. The jungle hears impatience first. Another lesson was camouflage. Not face paint patterns, but texture. Mud mixed with crushed leaves. Cloth dulled by soil. Shiny surfaces eliminated. At 15 meters, a Filipino operator didn't look hidden. He looked like part of the forest disorder. The Americans realized their camouflage was designed to be seen and mistaken. Navigation was different too. The Americans trusted maps and GPS Filipinos trusted slope, moisture, tree growth, wind direction. They could tell proximity to water without seeing it. They read trails animals made hours earlier. Technology gave certainty. The jungle rewarded awareness. Perhaps the most difficult lesson was restraint. Filipino operators waited. They accepted boredom, discomfort, insects, heat. They understood that survival favored those who disturbed least. The jungle, one said, will show you where you don't belong. For the first time, the Americans considered patience as a tactical advantage. Over weeks, training reversed. Americans observed. Filipinos led. Techniques were noted, adapted, refined. No press releases followed. No headlines. Just quiet adjustments that would later appear in training manuals, patrol doctrines, and jungle survival programs. History doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Years later, in Mindanao, those lessons mattered. Joint counter-terrorism operations placed Filipino NAVSOG operators at the front in dense jungle zones. American commanders, pragmatic and experienced, deferred without hesitation. In that environment, skill mattered more than nationality. The best operator took point. Everyone understood why. Trust followed performance. Filipino units guided American patrols through terrain once avoided. Casualties dropped. Detection improved. Missions shortened. Cooperation deepened. What began as a surprising exercise became a model for partnership, each force respecting what the other did best, without illusion of superiority. Fort Magsaysay became a quiet center of excellence. American SEALs returned regularly, not as instructors, as students. So did British SBS, Australian SAS, Japanese Special Forces, South Korean naval units. The jungle had become a classroom. The Filipinos, its native professors. No medals were issued for the whisper that night. No official citation recorded the 5 minutes that changed minds. But among those who were there, the memory stayed sharp. It reminded them that mastery is contextual and arrogance is expensive. The Filipino operator never became famous. He returned to training younger men, repeating fundamentals passed down long before formal doctrine. Move slowly. Respect terrain. Listen more than you act. Technology helps, but only if it doesn't make you loud. For the Americans, the lesson endured. Advanced equipment remained essential, but it was no longer worshipped. It became a tool, not a shield. In jungles across the world, patrols adjusted pace, posture, mindset, carrying with them an invisible Filipino influence. This was not a story of one side losing. It was a story of adaptation, of recognizing that excellence wears different uniforms in different environments. The jungle does not care about rank, funding, or reputation. It responds only to understanding. In 1992, 8 American SEALs learned they could be perfectly trained and still vulnerable. They learned that silence can defeat censors, that patience can defeat speed, and that humility can defeat pride. The whisper, "You're dead," was not a threat. It was a lesson delivered with restraint, a reminder that power listens when it wants to survive. And that is how, in the deep Philippine jungle, the world's most famous special operators quietly became students, while Filipino humanity, skill, and respect for place rewrote modern jungle warfare without ever asking for credit.